Phishing-resistant authentication methods deserve priority because attackers increasingly target users rather than systems. Phishing resistance means that even if a user clicks a malicious link, they cannot be tricked into approving access for an attacker. Examples include hardware-based security keys following standards like FIDO2, or platform authenticators that tie cryptographic credentials to the user's device. Push-based prompts are better than passwords, but still vulnerable if users approve requests reflexively. SMS codes offer limited protection because they can be intercepted or spoofed. As organizations mature, they should shift toward methods that cannot be replayed or proxied. For I1, demonstrating that the most sensitive accounts use phishing-resistant factors shows measurable progress toward a resilient identity posture. MFA coverage for critical systems is the evidence reviewers look for first. At the I1 level, all administrative, remote, and high-impact systems must enforce MFA at every entry point. This includes cloud dashboards, remote management interfaces, and any tool with access to sensitive data. Non-critical internal systems should still have MFA when feasible, but the focus is on protecting access that could lead to widespread compromise. The requirement is not that every login be equal, but that the riskiest logins always have an extra gate. A coverage matrix listing systems, user groups, and MFA status helps visualize where protections exist and where gaps remain. Complete coverage for privileged and external access is the standard that distinguishes I1 from essential hygiene. Authenticator types generally fall into three families: apps, tokens, and biometrics. App-based authenticators, such as those using time-based one-time passwords, are popular because they cost little and integrate widely. Hardware tokens provide tamper-resistant keys and work well for high-assurance roles like system administrators. Biometric factors, fingerprint, face, or voice recognition, add convenience but must operate within secure devices and meet privacy standards. Each type has different recovery and management needs. The best practice is diversity. Choose more than one supported factor so users have alternatives when one fails. Assure that backup methods are as strong as the primary. Weaker recovery paths often undermine the entire control. For assurance, the key is that the chosen methods are documented, enforced, and tested regularly. Enrollment, binding, and recovery processes decide whether MFA is truly trustworthy. Enrollment confirms the user's identity before issuing a factor. Binding links the authenticator to the correct account through controlled steps, often requiring an in-person check or an existing trusted credential. Recovery is where many controls fail because rushed resets can bypass verification. I1 expects documented procedures that show how users prove identity before new factors are activated, who can approve resets, and how logs record the event. The fewer people who can override MFA, the safer the system. In audits, reviewers often find weaknesses here, not in the technology, but in the process discipline. Strong processes make MFA sustainable without creating helpdesk chaos. Session management and re-authentication windows ensure that authentication remains valid only for as long as necessary. Users should not stay authenticated indefinitely. Sessions need reasonable timeouts, especially for sensitive applications. Re-authentication should occur when users escalate privileges, access critical data, or return after extended inactivity. Idle session limits reduce risk from unattended devices, while re-authentication windows balance security with usability. Systems should log session events and enforce consistent policies across platforms. The goal is to maintain continuous assurance that the logged-in user is still the authorized one. Short, clear configurations and reliable timeouts demonstrate both intent and execution in control evidence. Privileged access requires step-up MFA even when users are already authenticated. Step up means an additional factor is demanded before performing sensitive actions such as system changes, user management, or data exports. Administrative portals, cloud management consoles, and critical infrastructure must always require MFA at this step. The logic is simple. If an attacker compromises a user session, they should still face another barrier before reaching the most sensitive functions. For reviewers, step-up MFA shows maturity. It reflects that security is not static but contextual. Properly configured, it provides strong assurance without excessive burden on routine users. It also integrates naturally with privileged access management systems that broker sessions and enforce least privilege.
Service and automation accounts deserve explicit attention because they often bypass interactive authentication altogether. Even though these accounts cannot use standard MFA, they must have compensating controls such as strong, rotated credentials and restricted scopes. Credential management systems should store secrets securely and log every use. Default or shared accounts should be eliminated or converted to managed identities wherever possible. IX expects that organizations know where these accounts exist, who owns them, and how their use is monitored. Service accounts should never become invisible parts of the environment. For assurance, clear documentation and sample credential audits prove that automation is managed, not uncontrolled.
Remote access, virtual private networks, and single sign-on gateways must all enforce MFA because they are common entry points for attackers. MFA should be mandatory at the VPN connection layer and again at cloud identity providers that manage SSO. Integration across systems reduces user friction while maintaining consistent policy enforcement. For remote administrators and third parties, MFA is a contractual and technical requirement. Logging of successful and failed remote MFA attempts provides valuable audit evidence and early warnings of attack attempts. Demonstrating coverage here reassures both internal leadership and customers that the perimeter is resilient even as workforces and systems remain distributed.
Legacy protocols and exception handling often reveal the true maturity of an MFA program. Some older systems do not support modern authentication methods, but they still need to be protected through gateways, compensating controls, or phased replacement. All exceptions must be documented with reasons, risk analysis, and planned end dates. This shows reviewers that gaps are known and managed, not ignored. Whenever legacy systems remain in use, network segmentation, strict logging, and compensating access reviews can reduce risk. The difference between a temporary exception and a weakness is documentation and follow-through. In I1, maturity is measured not by perfection, but by honesty and progress. Evidence for authentication and MFA should include exports, screenshots, and configuration policies that prove enforcement. Screenshots must show the system name, timestamp, and relevant settings, such as MFA enabled and applied to required roles. Configuration exports from identity platforms provide the clearest proof of policy coverage. If logs are used, include filters showing successful and failed attempts with timestamps. Policies and procedures should align with what the evidence shows. Reviewers should be able to trace each claim to a visible setting or file. Clear, dated artifacts eliminate ambiguity and keep QA reviews short and predictable. Evidence discipline is as important as control strength. Common pitfalls include incomplete coverage, poor recovery procedures, and inconsistent enforcement across environments. Some organizations enable MFA for cloud dashboards but forget internal admin consoles. Others rely on text message codes for convenience, leaving gaps in phishing resistance. Weakness also arises when help desks can reset factors without proper verification or when service accounts remain unmonitored. Corrective actions focus on mapping every system and user type, closing gaps with consistent methods, and strengthening reset verification. Regular testing of enrollment and removal workflows confirms that the design still works after changes. Addressing these pitfalls turns MFA from a checkbox into a living safeguard. A consistent and enforced authentication posture is the goal. I1 expects organizations to prove that users, administrators, and automated systems all authenticate in ways proportionate to their risk. MFA must be present, configured, and monitored, with phishing-resistant options prioritized where possible. Exceptions must be few, documented, and temporary. Evidence must be clear, dated, and tied to policies that match real configurations. When authentication works this way, trust is earned instead of assumed, and assurance becomes a reflection of daily discipline rather than a snapshot in time. Strong authentication is not just a control, it is the foundation of digital trust in every assurance program.